COVID and secondary impacts of the COVID pandemic, and then post-Brexit impact. There are one or two other flying questions, and we will start with an opener on behalf of the absent Chairman of the Defence Committee about Afghanistan. Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming, Prime Minister. On behalf of Tobias Ellwood and myself, I wanted to ask about Op Herrick. Now, I realise you're making a statement tomorrow, but given that more than 450 servicemen and women were killed on operations, given that more than £22 billion was spent, I'm sure you'll be keen to tell us how an inquiry is going to be conducted on our deployment to Kabul, to Helmand, and later the withdrawal.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Tugendhat. And of course, the people of Afghanistan have been the beneficiaries of, as you know, decades of UK support and investment. We've done our level best to help the stability, the security, the peace of that country. You yourself, Tom, have served there, and it has been a huge, huge commitment. Hundreds of British troops have died in that cause, and if you ask me whether I feel happy about the current situation in Afghanistan, of course I don't. I'm apprehensive. I think that the situation is fraught with risks. We must hope that the parties in Kabul can come together to reach an agreement, and somehow or other we must hope that an accommodation must be found eventually with the Taliban. That we have to be absolutely realistic about the situation that we're in, and what we have to hope is that the blood and treasure spent by this country over decades in protecting the people of Afghanistan has not been in vain, and that the legacy of their efforts is protected, and that's what this government will try to do as far as we possibly can with our American friends. The situation is difficult. I will be making a statement tomorrow on it, Tom. I think probably it'd be better not to anticipate any further the statement I'll make. And on the matter of the inquiry, you're ahead of us there.
I think it's those servicemen and women who lost their colleagues and their families will want to know that lessons have been learned, or lessons are being learned and implemented. How will we make sure that happens?
Well, we learn lessons the whole time, but if you're asking me to extemporise an announcement now about an inquiry into Afghanistan, I'm not going to do that. But what I can do, and I don't think that the Speaker would want me to anticipate the statement that I intend to make tomorrow. And I know, Tom, that you'll be wanting to interrogate me. Then I think that would be probably the right time.
Can I just ask a very quick supplementary about members of the armed forces going on operations now? Most of our NATO allies are double jabbing their personnel before they go on operations. They're not relying on their civilian rollout in order to make sure that their servicemen and women are vaccinated. Is this something that you could at least take away and address?
To the best of my knowledge, we do have for instance, the carrier strike group that we've just sent out around the world that will be mixing with doing operations with 40 friendly countries, 40 allies of us around the world. They have protection from the virus.
Thank you. We'll crack on. Short questions and short answers, and we'll get through all the stuff we want. Chris Bryant.
Thank you. Prime Minister, in the general election you told miners in Mansfield, we will make sure no miner signed up to the mine workers' pension scheme is out of pocket. We will make sure that all their cash is fully protected and returned. I have looked into it and we will ensure that's done. When is this categorical pledge, going to be honoured?
Thanks, Mr. Bryant. The mine workers' pension scheme members are receiving payments that are 33% higher than they would have been thanks to the government's guarantee. And on most occasions, the scheme has been in surplus, but we remain resolutely committed to protecting the pensions of mine workers and supporting their families.
No, but you guaranteed that the additional money was going to go to them, and you were going to sort out the issue which all MPs of all political parties on the Bayes Select Committee agreed to a report which said that the £1.2 billion in the Investment Reserve Fund, which was put in there by miners, should go to miners and their widows now, not to the government. Will you undertake to honour that pledge?
Well, as I told you, the trustees do have freedom to be less risk averse with their investment strategy, and I will certainly come back to you on the point that you raised.
No, but the government's already told the Bayes Select Committee that you're not going to honour that pledge. So do you not know the facts of this?
Well, I'm telling you that the Mine Workers Pension Scheme already ensures that members receive payments higher than they would have done thanks to the government's guarantee, and we will continue to ensure that the scheme members are looked after.
I think a lot of people will be upset, but anyway, do you...
We'll have a letter on that if possible, because I don't think that's really been answered.
I'll be more than happy to write.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Bryan.
Different matter. Do you support closing the loophole so that MPs who are suspended from the House for more than 10 days for sexual harassment and bullying are subject to the Recall of MPs Act?
I know that work is going on to address this matter, and I certainly, this is a matter for the House, and I would urge the House to get on and do it.
It can only be a matter for the House if the government tables the motion and supports it. Will you support it?
Well, I think that the Leader of the House is currently at work on a way of closing the loophole, and I certainly urge the MPs to get on and do that.
So you think the loophole should be closed?
There is clearly a loophole, and I see no reason why it shouldn't be closed, but that is not a matter for the government, that's a matter for Parliament.
It can only be decided by Parliament if government allows time for it, but I take the point that you do support that. At the moment, we have 4 different registers for ministers and MPs to abide by. The Register of Ministers' Interests, the List of Ministers' Hospitality, the List of Ministers' Gifts, and the Commons Register of Members' Interests. They all publish these at different times, at intermittent periods, in different places, and according to different rules. Isn't it time we had a single set of rules governing all of these matters?
Well, some matters are clearly a matter for Parliament and concern the actions of MPs, and it wouldn't be right for the executive, for government to determine how those work. Matters relating to the conduct of ministers are a matter for the executive, and I think that's quite a sensible division.
But it ends up meaning that 2 members of Parliament sitting next to each other in the Royal Box at Wimbledon, for instance, register the matter in completely different ways and to completely different rules and at completely different times and in different places. That just isn't fair, is it?
I think it's sensible that there should be a distinction between the invigilation of the of Parliament and of the executive, and it's not surprising that there are different approaches and different ways of doing this.
The list of ministerial interests is only published twice a year, whereas the list of members' interests is published much more frequently. By the time the list of ministerial interests appears, lots of the interests that were relevant at one point during that time are no longer appear in the list at all, because they are apparently deemed no longer to be relevant. Wouldn't it make much more sense to publish the list of ministerial interests every month?
Well, it's certainly an idea, Mr. Bryan. I'm happy to look into it, but the system at the moment is that MPs and ministers have to publish their interests. The public can scrutinise them, and that's entirely as it should be. And I would encourage everybody to do that, to fit in their MPs' interests in a timely way, as well as their ministerial interests.
But for the most of the last year, the list of ministerial interests hasn't even been an accurate list of ministers, because it's updated so rarely that it simply isn't. No member of the public can spot in real time what are the interests that might be affecting a ministerial decision.
Well, the list of ministerial interests, to the best of my knowledge, has only recently been published. It's there for your interest and for the public's information. People can can look at it and draw all the conclusions they need to draw.
I'm glad you referred to it. The latest list says that there were interest did arise in relation to the refurbishment of your flat in Downing Street, as set out at paragraph 32 of the Independent Advisor's annual report. Paragraph 32 then says, an interest did arise, but does not say what that interest was, because it says that by the time of publication, which was delayed by many, many months, this was no longer relevant. So can you tell us what was the interest that you should have declared? How much was it? When was it paid off? And why was it not registered in the parliamentary register of members' interests?
All for the very good reason that there is a ministerial register, and all that needed to be registered was duly registered as the advisor on ministerial interests, Lord Geit has confirmed.
That's not actually what he says. He produces an entirely circular argument between paragraph 32 of one report and another paragraph in another report, neither of which reveals both of which say that there was an interest that should have been declared and that it has not now been declared.
I have nothing to add to what I just said, and Lord Geit has said that everything that should have been registered has been registered in the proper way.
Final question from me. When a minister lies, they should correct the record. I presume you agree.
Of course.
They might do so inadvertently. That's the general assumption of how we do our business in Parliament, that no minister deliberately lies, though there have been occasions in our history when that has happened and a minister has been forced to resign. It seems that you very rarely correct the record. Why is that?
I think I'm going to need you to give me chapter and verse there, as they say.
I think there are plenty of instances where you have been told by various independent and outside bodies that the precise words that you've used have not been the full and accurate version of events.
Well, let me give you an example. Okay, well, Mr. Brown, let me give you an example because I think you're, if I may say so, and great respect to you, Sven, I'm not entirely sure that Mr. Brown's questions are in order, but let me give you an example. It's commonly asserted, for instance, that when we put the figure of £350 million a week on the side of a bus that went round this country, causing a great deal of hoo-ha, that was erroneous, and that did not reflect the true figure. That's probably one of the things that you're thinking of, is it, Mr. Brown?
No, I'm thinking of, did you sack Matt Hancock?
Well, let me continue at this point.
Did you sack Matt Hancock?
Let me give you an example of the £350 million a week. This was a figure that related to the gross sum that the UK gave to the EU budget. It was a subject of lively controversy during the referendum campaign 5 years ago, as you remember. Actually, it turned out, if anything, Sir Bernard, to be a slight underestimate. And by this year, the gross figure would have been considerably higher. Sorry, if on your question about Mr. Hancock, the former Health Secretary, let me just go back to what I said many times, and I think I said on the floor of the House of Commons, which was that we read about, and I think you read about, we all read about the story concerning Mr. Hancock and CCTV and so forth on, I think, the Friday, and we had a new Health Secretary on the Saturday. And considering that we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and it's quite a thing to move your Health Secretary, Mr. Brown, I think that was quite fast going, if I may say so. And that's all I have to say on that matter.
But you said you sacked him when you did.
I'm afraid you've had your time.
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
fine.
Thank you very much. Moving on, Philip Dunn.
Thank you, Sir Bernard. Prime Minister, I'm going to move on to the subject of COP26 and the government's policies and delivery against those policies on climate change. Before I came into this place, my mantra was that past performance was no guide to the future. When the government responded to the Climate Change Committee's progress report recently, the government pointed to the historic success, which is laudable, in reducing reliance on renewable energy. Given the COVID crisis delay on introducing the myriad policies required to deliver against the admirable target of 78% reduction in emissions by 1990. When can we expect you or your ministers to start delivering to this House the policies that are required to get us to 78%?
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Dunn. Well, you will have seen what the government announced in the 10-point plan that I set out last November, and you will have seen what is happening with investments in green technology in this country. Just in the last week, you've seen Nissan confirming in Sunderland that they're going to be launching a massive investment in green vehicles, in battery-powered vehicles. You saw what's happening with the Gigafactory. You've seen what Stellantis is doing at Ellesmere Port. In terms of delivery on wind power and our objective of becoming the Saudi Arabia of wind, there are huge investments going on now, and the Secretary of State for BEIS has a mandate to produce 40 gigawatts of wind, which is enough to supply the domestic needs, the energy needs of every single household in this country by 2030. That is an incredible ambition, but I'm sure that we can do it, because you've been out to the coast of the northeast, around the country. You can see the incredible potential of the UK. You can see what we could do in Doggerland and elsewhere. And we will do it. But you make the point about the historic achievement, and it is absolutely enormous. Don't forget that I think that the UK has cut CO2 emissions by more than 40% on 1990 levels, while the economy has grown by 75%, and we're confident that green technology and green investments are the route not just to cutting CO2, but to long-term job creation and economic growth.
I think you're right, Prime Minister, that there is enormous potential for the private sector to work with government in investing in new technologies, but they cannot do so in the absence of clarity about what the government's demand signals will be and what strategies will be in place. So wherever you look, whether it's the hydrogen strategy, the heat and building strategy, understanding how we're going to cope with the energy efficiency of homes, which is a massive task. 19 million homes need retrofitting. At the moment, there is a lacuna. We don't have these policies out there. And the private sector are not yet in a position to invest.
Did you say a vicuna?
A lacuna, I should have said.
A vicuna is a
there's a gap.
We want to protect the vicuna, and we want to eradicate the lacuna, if I may say so. The vicuna forms a key part of our biodiversity objectives, but the lacuna is the thing that we are going to...
Back to the point now, Prime
well,
Minister.
but I'm grateful. There is a huge opportunity for this country to lead in low carbon technology, but also to drive jobs and growth, and that is what we are doing. And if you look at what we've done since this new government, since I came in 2 years ago, the 10-point plan. You say we haven't set out the framework for it. We have set out the framework. It's there. People can see what we need to do. So it's green vehicles, and that's a big thing in itself. And that means basically electrifying our fleet. And you could not have a more powerful signal on vehicles than what the government said. We're moving to electric vehicles by 2030. In this country. That was the government setting the signal and making the market. There's no other country in Europe that has adopted such a brave and bold timetable. And what has happened, much to our satisfaction and relief, is that the automotive sector in the UK and around the world has responded, and they are investing. And I get back to what I said about the Nissan investments, what's happening at Stellantis and elsewhere. And we will work to ensure that we bring this is the key thing, we have the scale of manufacture in this country to allow the price of these EVs and other green technology goods to come down. So that's EVs. Then there's domestic heat and power.
If you'll excuse me, Prime Minister, I've got 30 seconds left. And I need to get a couple more questions in. In relation to the COP26, this is your opportunity to be on the world stage with representatives of every nation on earth. You won't get such an opportunity during your Prime Ministership. You need to be able to demonstrate that the UK is leading, as you've just done on batteries, but all the other areas where the strategies are not in place. Are we going to see these coming out before COP26? Let's take hydrogen strategy, for example. Many other countries, there are 16 other countries that have developed a hydrogen strategy. We don't have one.
I'm afraid I've got to disagree with you completely. The UK was the first country in the world, Philip, the first major developed economy to set a net zero target by 2050. When this government took over the running of COP, only 30% of the global economy was committed to net zero by 2050. It's now 70%. We have a huge on hydrogen. It's there in the 10-point plan. BEIS are driving a very strong hydrogen strategy.
And they haven't published it yet, Prime Minister. That's the point.
And if you look at what's happening with carbon capture and storage and the creation of hydrogen, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, in the northeast and elsewhere, I think you're right. I think hydrogen is a big part.
But we haven't got a published strategy.
But it is only one of the horses that we're betting on. It must be a big
Mr.
part of the solution.
I have a quick final question, where I think we can agree. You, I believe, were as shocked as I was to see reports of Amazon destroying unsold consumer electronics from a warehouse less than an hour away from Glasgow, where you'll be holding COP26. Is there anything that you can do as a UK government to hold global corporates to account for their environmental footprint?
I read that and I was absolutely horrified, though I noticed that Amazon then tried to clear it up in some way and claim that it wasn't as it had been initially presented. I don't know the reality of the position, but obviously destroying consumer electronics to landfill in that way is absolutely insane. But what we have done, and we did this at the G7, we for the first time got global agreement that there should be a tax on the sales of internet giants such as Amazon on the basis of their sales in market. So in the UK, this is a massive achievement, led, I may say, by Rishi, by the Chancellor, to get a global agreement on taxing the internet giants, and about time too.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Clive Betts.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. To continue with the theme of moving towards zero carbon, and looking at the situation in housing now, housing is responsible for about 15% of carbon emissions. The Climate Change Commission said in December that there had been minimal progress in recent years in reducing the level of emissions from housing, and that what we need, and we're coming back to the point from before, was an agreed framework, not an agreed framework about what we want to achieve, but how we're going to achieve it. Where can I find that framework showing how we're going to get to net zero carbon in housing?
Well, first of all, Clive, I'm going to disagree with you timidly about what's happened already, because there's been a massive reduction in emissions from housing. And it's been, if you look at the proportion of emissions now that come from transport, that's because we forced down CO2 emissions from domestic heating and also commercial property. Now the big challenge. So and let me just give you one statistic: 40% of homes in England, that's 10.8 million homes, are now above energy performance certificate band C. That's up from only 12% in 2009, which was about
but what the Commission said, Prime Minister, was that there had been reasonable progress up to 2015. The last 5 years, there's been minimal progress. That's in the Commission's report.
Well, what I'm saying is there is massive progress that has been made and continues,
but not in recent years,
and continues to be made. So what we're doing now, and this is, and I'm going to be frank with the committee, this is something that is very difficult to pull off, because what we need to do is to ensure that we're able to heat people and homes and provide them with power in an affordable way, whilst also reducing CO2. And you know perfectly well, Mr. Betts, that the ways of doing that through ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps, or through hydrogen, as Philip was saying, these are the principal alternatives that we have.
They are.
And what we're doing is building a market, working with with producers, with manufacturers, with the whole sector, to ensure that just as we're doing that with the electric vehicle manufacturers, we drive the bills down.
Okay,
because what we can't have is a situation in which ordinary homeowners, ordinary people living in their own home, are suddenly faced with an unexpected and unreasonable cost to put in a ground source or air source heat pump.
How are we going to do it then, Prime Minister? I mean,
I'll tell you how.
The Climate Change Commission said, and I think it's on the path to net zero, we have to get all homes not using fossil fuel boilers by 2033. That's 25 million homes. Last year, there were 38,000 heat pumps put in homes, 38,000, and by 2033, all homes have got to have either a heat pump or a hydrogen boilers, which aren't currently yet available. Where is the plan to do that?
You're right, but what we're doing is working with the manufacturers and working with the market.
So it can be done. Can it be achieved?
To ensure that we have the heat pumps in sufficient quantity to bring the price down. At the moment, let's be frank, these things cost about 10 grand a pop. Okay, right. This is a lot of money. For ordinary people, we've got to make sure that when we embark on this programme, that we have a solution that is affordable and that works for people, and we won't do it. We won't be imposing it until we've
So is the 2033 target then one that's going to be delivered?
I think we can do it in a very rapid timescale, and that's what we are doing. But it takes a great deal of determination. It means working with the producers. It means driving down the cost. And it means, as I was saying to Philip about electric vehicles, it means setting the market and setting the parameters. And at the moment, the prices are too high.
Right. Can I just talk then about future planning? Because one organisation looking at planning is an organisation called Place Shapers. Now, they're an organisation, you probably won't further term, perhaps, I understand that, of middle-sized housing associations. They have about 1 million homes in their responsibility, 1 million homes. They've looked at what it would cost them, part of their business plan, to get to zero carbon homes by 2050. For 1 million homes, they calculated it was going to be £104 billion. Only one of them could do it without going bankrupt. So where is the financial plan to enable social housing providers who want to do the right thing to be able to plan ahead and do it?
I think in a way you're repeating what I've just said, which is that...
Where is the plan?
The plan is to work with the manufacturers of these...
Yeah, but where is the financial plan to enable housing to afford it?
And we'll be bringing forward a plan under carbon budget.
When's that?
Under carbon budget.
Can we have a date?
We will be bringing forward a plan before COP 26
before COP, we'll have a date
in November this year. Before COP, you will be getting a plan on the decarbonisation of the domestic market in this country, Clyde. But what I'm saying to you, and I think people will be interested in this. This government is determined to keep bills low.
Absolutely.
And to make and that is a priority. Now, the only way to do that is to build the market in a very systematic way, to make sure that we have the technology and make sure that it's affordable. And there are some big bets that we may need to place. Some bets we may need to place on hydrogen, but also some bets on ground source and air source heat pumps. And that is what
we'll have a plan where government shows their financial support both for social housing and for owner occupiers who want to do the right thing as well.
Yes, and there are the models and the solutions may be very different across different types of housing, different housing stocks. You know all the arguments, but you'll see it long before COP26.
Good. We look forward to it. Moving on to Caroline Noakes.
Thanks, Bernard. Are you hoping for any gender-specific outcomes from COP26? And if so, how will they be measured?
Thanks very much, Caroline. I think that the COP26 programme is one that will be of immense benefit to all of humanity. But I believe that in helping to tackle climate change, and it will help to tackle economic inequality, and I think that it will inevitably be of massive benefit to those who have tended to suffer the most, women in particular, who don't get, when it comes to their education, for instance, Caroline, don't get, in my view, as much investment as they need. And one of the things that we did at the G7 was to ensure that we put another $2.5 billion into the Global Partnership for Education, the bulk of which is to be spent on female education around the world. That's something I've campaigned on for a very long time, and I think that everybody coming to COP26 will understand that there's a clear link between economic progress, sorting out climate change, addressing climate change, and empowering and advancing women, and ending the injustice that so many young girls around the world receive far less investment in their education than young boys of the same age.
Will the cuts to UK aid help those girls, Prime Minister?
The UK is actually investing more, putting more money into education, female education. I think we're putting £453 million into the Global Partnership for Education, and Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya is coming to London in just a few days' time to help us raise even more.
Thank you.
Moving on, Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Prime Minister, at the G7, you didn't manage to get any of our 6 closest allies to pledge to abandon coal use. How do you think you're going to manage to get China to do something similar in Glasgow?
China is a huge global economy, the fastest growing emitter, and we have to address that problem. And I think that
now, how are you going to get them to agree?
By engagement. And I think that what you can't do is simply push China away, say that we must have nothing to do with China. China is a member of the P5. China sits on the UN Security Council, quite rightly. We've got to engage with China and make the case to China. And I think one of the most important things to come out of the G7 was the idea of the Build Back Better World, or the Clean Green Initiative. And that is a way.
I'm going to go to my questions, Prime Minister, rather than your answers, if you'll forgive me for a second. You're stretching
more interested in your questions than my answers.
No, I'm interested in your
answers. What is your prerogative, Mr. Dugan?
I'm interested in your answers to my questions, not to the questions you'd wished I'd asked. You did say in the General Assembly in 2019 that digital authoritarianism is not, alas, the stuff of dystopian fantasy, but of an emerging reality. How is that compatible with your recent decision, or rather your government's recent decision, not to call in Newport wafer fab for investigation?
This is a very difficult business, and this relates to people should know this relates to a chip manufacturer in Wales. We're looking into it. I've asked the National Security Advisor to review.
So it is being reviewed now.
We will look at it again. But don't forget that the
Business Secretary told me it was a matter for the Welsh Government.
Thanks to they rather sweetly asked us to deal with it. But what I can tell you, Tom, is that thanks to this government and our prudence in passing the National Security and Investment Bill, which I'm sure you voted for,
I did.
Good. We are able to take action.
Well, I'm delighted. It's a very important bill that you passed there, and therefore, if it's not used at a time...
I want to stress, and on this issue, and there will be others. Don't forget, this is the government. When I came in, we took the very difficult and painful step, and Greg will know all about this because you were, I think, Business Secretary, you had to deal with this. We took the very difficult and painful step of having to extricate this country from the Huawei.
I remember it was a very successful rebellion.
So this government is spending a huge quantity of taxpayers' money to make sure that we get Huawei out of our telecommunications networks, or out of the critical.
Prime Minister, you're going over history. May I move on?
I want to make a very, very important point, because I do not want us, and I do not want anti-China spirit to lead to us trying to pitchfork away, Sir Bernard, every investment from China into this country.
No,
I have to
but
say,
Prime Minister, there is a difference. Prime Minister, if I may, there is a difference between investment, which is looking for a normal return, to the purchase of technology. And what we're seeing here from Nexperia, which, as you know, is a company that is mostly owned actually by a Chinese state-backed firm, we're seeing a Chinese state-backed entity buying a semiconductor manufacturer at a time of global shortage, when Beijing is already looking for to stockpile semiconductors. Now, if China thinks this is a matter of their national security and essential to their sovereignty, if Italy, if Brussels, if the United States, if other countries agree and other entities agree, why don't you?
I think semiconductors are of huge importance to this country. And one of the things that I wanted to look at immediately as I became Prime Minister was whether or not we could become more self-reliant. And I'm told it costs about £9 billion for us to build a proper semiconductor factory. It's a lot of money, particularly during a pandemic, where we're thinking about what to do. There is this company. They make a lot of semiconductors in Ireland, as you know, but there is this company in Newport. We have to judge whether the stuff that they are making is of real intellectual property value and interest to China, whether the real security implications. I've asked the National Security Advisor to look at it.
Now, you mentioned the pandemic, and I'm delighted you did, because your decision on 0.7 to 0.5 must have been a very difficult decision for you, as you committed so publicly and clearly and frequently to 0.7 yourself, and I remember as Foreign Secretary you did as well. We're seeing a cut in the budget going to global tropical medicine and global vaccines at a time when we now know the interconnectedness of all our health globally. It's going from £150 million to £17 million at a time when we're seeing variants coming in from all over the world, and are likely to see more variants in the near future.
Sorry to rush you.
Will you be making sure that there is a vote in Parliament on this issue, and will you be looking to reverse such cuts which undermine the national security of this country as quickly as possible? Well,
again, Tom, I'm going to disagree with you in your characterisation of what this government is doing, because actually, you talk about vaccines. We put 1.5 billion of UK taxpayers' money into supporting supporting COVAX, and I think a further 450 or so into.
And that's brilliant. But this is separate.
And I just remind people watching this that of the 1.5 billion vaccines that the world has so far, that the developed nations have so far distributed around the world, roughly a third are as a result of the efforts of the UK government, the deal we did with Oxford, so that those vaccines are distributed at cost. That's the direct result of UK government action. I think people should be very, very proud of that.
I agree. We should be extremely proud of that.
We're talking about very, very big sums of money in a pandemic when we've had to spend £407 billion looking after the jobs, livelihoods, well-being, welfare of families in this country as well.
I think you should be rightly proud of the vaccines technology.
Thank you, Mr. Duganhart. Very grateful to you. Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Sir Bernard. Prime Minister, you've talked a good talk about the ambitions you've got for net zero, but 37 billion of revenue a year is solely dependent on the consumption of fossil fuel or greenhouse gas emissions. 37 billion, same price as test and trace, just for ease, and 28 billion is fuel duty alone. So how can you give the British public an idea of how you're going to fill that gap in revenue as we go greener?
Sorry, 37 billion of revenue from fuel duty.
No, 28 billion from fuel duty, 37 billion, which is dependent on other consumption.
Well, Meg, I mean, you're making an incredibly good point. You're talking about our the fiscal impact of moving to green technology and the implications of that as you phase out hydrocarbon vehicles, you phase out internal combustion engine vehicles, and you phase out.
So
the
we
use
know
of fossil
why, but I think
fuels.
the public would be interested to know what
Well,
your
I think-
thoughts are about how we go forward.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify for everybody. There is a down the line, of course, the Exchequer will start to see a loss of revenue. What I don't want to do, and let it be said now, and I saw some misreporting about this. What I don't, or some misunderstandings, I should say, I don't want to see fuel bills go up to compensate, if you see what I mean, Meg. So that is not the way forward.
So that's off the table. Is there anything on the table to fill
Well,
the gap?
that's a matter for. I would not presume to anticipate the fiscal options of the Chancellor at a budget or any other fiscal event, as you know, Meg.
Well, there's something to be said for encouraging the Chancellor of the Exchequer to make a major statement about how we're going to plan public expenditure and taxation over the next decade.
I don't think you could fault the Chancellor for making major statements in the last.
But you would encourage him to do that.
Few months. I think he's.
You would encourage him to do that.
I think you will find that he has a lot to say in due course.
Very good. We're now going to move on to COVID secondary impacts and the COVID pandemic. So can I start with Greg Clark?
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. I'd like to ask you about some of the lessons that can be learned so far in responding to the pandemic. But before I do, can I just ask a couple of quick questions of current concern? And the first is, why shouldn't double vaccinated Brits be able to go on holiday to Spain this summer?
Thanks, Greg. Look, I think that double vaccination is a potential and it's a great liberator. In principle, in practice, I think it's going to be great. And it already is. You can see the benefits. Two vaccines, whether of Pfizer or AstraZeneca or a cocktail.
Why can't people go to Spain?
They offer a lot of protection. And so what you will find is if you can contain your impatience just a little bit, is that the Secretary of State for Transport may be saying more about that in the course of the next few days, perhaps even tomorrow.
We hear that
perhaps even tomorrow.
And
I would not want to steal his thunder.
We know from the press that it's going to be about quarantine. But what I'm interested in is your instinct on the guidance for amber list countries, which states you should not travel to amber list countries. Is your instinct to get rid of it?
I think you should. I really don't want to anticipate or to steal the thunder of the Secretary of State for Transport. But what I can say, repeat what I've said already. I think that double vaccination offers massive potential.
Do you recognise they come together, the guidance and the requirements? They should be lockstep.
Of course.
Okay, that's fine.
And so you'll see a lot more on that.
Very
I think that the crucial thing is to remember that currently we need to contain the pandemic. We need to.
Well, let's come on to that. So I've got one question on that before we go on to other
that double vaccination is clearly the way forward.
So the 16th of August, when contacts of people with COVID no longer have to isolate, is the 16th of August, is that the date that you expect us to reach herd immunity in this country?
That's not the consideration.
So what's the significance of the 16th of August?
It's the time by which we feel that there will have been much more progress made in vaccination.
More than the 19th of
July? Even more than the 19th of July. And of course, all these decisions are a balance of risk. And by the 16th of August, we will have got many more jabs into people's arms.
Many more young and healthy people.
Many more people
vaccinated.
Yeah, which is a good thing because it means.
But they are the most robust against COVID that we're waiting for.
Sure, and I'm sorry that they've had to wait. I know how frustrating.
I'm concerned about the consequences of that rather than the wait. Is it the case that until we get to that point on the 16th of August, people who have been jabbed twice will have to isolate even if they've had a negative COVID test?
We're asking people to isolate. I know how frustrating it is. But
why?
Because we have to. I'm afraid this is a highly contagious disease, and we have to do what we can to stop its spread. And that's the judgment
an estimate of how many contacts will have to isolate during that extra 28 days after the the United
Well, clearly that will depend on the spread of the.
Indeed, but have you seen an estimate?
I haven't seen any data on that, and obviously it will depend on the numbers.
So
but
the Health Secretary has said that there could be around 100,000 infections a day, and if each of those has 2 contacts each, that's 200,000 a day. So over the course of that 28 days, the extra days that have been imposed, that's over 5 million people. Is that a reasonable step? And have you considered how many hospital admissions that is going to prevent?
We've been looking at all the data and trying to strike the right balance. And
so what are the two sides?
Well, the two sides of it are that you could simply say we're going to dispense altogether with self-isolation and move straight to a testing regime and not bother with asking people to do that anymore. The difficulty with that is that you would be effectively allowing many more people to be vectors of disease than by continuing with our plans.
But do you have an estimate of how many fewer hospital admissions would result from that?
I can't give you that number. But what I can certainly say is that we believe that the programme of test, trace and isolate has actually made a massive difference to the disease.
You know, and I know that you respect Sir John Bell, the Regius Professor of Medicine at Oxford, and he, in evidence to my committee, said at the very least you should be able to be tested and released from COVID rather than to have to isolate for that period. And what he said was that actually it's more likely that people will comply with the guidance if there's a way out of it if they test negative. Will you consider at least taking Sir John's very expert advice?
We're moving to testing. That's rather than isolation.
Before the 16th of August.
That's the date where obviously we keep all data under review. We'll always be open to looking at the data, but that's we think the sensible approach. We want to retain the tool of asking people to protect others from the disease. It's been effective. It's an important thing to do.
No matter how many people
and I think we should stick with it.
It affects, and no matter what the result. Let me ask you one last question. Obviously, we're going to have the public inquiry that will look back when it's all over. But it is important to learn lessons on the way, and the Science and Technology Committee and the Health and Social Care Committees are conducting an inquiry into that. What would you do differently, given experience, and what would you do the same?
That's a very big question.
Give it an
Greg,
example.
but I think what I can. I mean, I can. If you ask me what things have we started to do differently, and where have we really adapted since?
How have you learned from the experience during the way?
I think that is a really good question. And since the beginning of the pandemic, what have we learned that's obvious? I think that to begin with. It was clear that we didn't have all the data that we needed, and we certainly didn't have it all in one place or all in the right place. Every morning now, I go straight into a meeting where I can see pretty much what's happening in any hospital in the country. I can see the breakdown by age, by variant type. I can see exactly what's happening in pretty much real time. So we've set up the UK Health Security Agency. We brought that. So data we didn't have, and now we have. I think that diagnostics was an obvious thing. We didn't even know how to make a lateral flow test when we began. We didn't have the technology. In this country, we now do. We now have a diagnostics industry that's growing. PPE, we remember how difficult and how traumatic that was.
So these are lessons learned on the way.
We now have the ability to make 80% of our PPE in this country. To say nothing of vaccine technology, which is obviously developed massively. I think the single most important thing. I mean, and I know how much, Greg, you care about this, and I think you're right. The single most important thing that we've learned, or certainly that I've learned, is the massive benefits to our country, to our society, to our economy of investing in science. And there is, you could not have a clearer object lesson than the discovery of the Oxford vaccine, and the impact that is now having on our ability to open up our society in a way that otherwise, frankly, we couldn't.
Well, I certainly agree with that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We're running over time badly, but we will press on as quickly as possible. Mr. Timms.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon.
Last October, the Working Pension Selection, on a unanimous cross-party basis, recommended that the £20 a week universal credit uplift should be made permanent. And last weekend, all 6 of the Conservative former Secretaries of State for Work and Pension since 2010 made the same call. How do you respond to that call?
I understand very much why people want to continue to invest in and to support the poorest and neediest in this society, and that's what we're going to do. And we will continue with an increase in pay for the lowest paid workers, which we've done. We've increased the national living wage. We've given councils huge sums to help those in greatest need. I think 4 million families have been helped to pay their council tax bills. You refer to the universal credit uplift amongst many other things that we have done, and they're huge, and they're part of the 407 billion. But I want to stress that as we come towards the inflection point in this pandemic, when we start to lift the non-pharmaceutical interventions, we start to lift the restraints on society, start to lift the government-imposed diktat that told people they couldn't go to work. Remember what we were saying. As we lift that, as we move beyond that, we have to have a different emphasis. And the emphasis has got to be on getting people into work and getting people into jobs.
But do you think,
and that's what we're doing.
Ian Douglas-Smith, Esther McVeigh, do you think they don't understand that
I have
point?
huge respect and admiration for all those people, and I understand where they're coming from. But the emphasis that this government is placing is on coming out of the pandemic with a strong jobs-led recovery.
If the cut goes ahead in 3 months' time, unemployment support will be at its lowest level in real terms for over 30 years, just as the end of the furlough scheme increases unemployment. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, 500,000 people would be pushed below the poverty line by taking the £20 away, including 200,000 children. And the universal credit allowance for under 25s has obviously been hard hit by job losses in the pandemic. That'll be cut by a quarter. Can all that damage really be justified?
But I think that the answer to that, and I understand what you're saying, but the answer is to get people into work. And if you look at what's actually happening since just in the last few months, you've seen that unemployment projections for unemployment, which you rightly worry about, but there are 2 million fewer than we were told there were going to be. We have lower unemployment than virtually all of the rest of the G7. Vacancy rates are up at pre-crisis levels, and the number of people on the payroll has now been rising for 5 consecutive months. It's true, there are now 2 million people still on furlough, and you're right to draw attention to that, and that's a very considerable concern. But if you look at Mr. Timms, if you look at what's actually happening in the jobs market. Yeah. If you look at what's happening in the jobs market, the problem at the moment, as I think most colleagues would testify, is a shortage of labour, not a shortage of jobs.
But do you accept that taking the £20 a week away will cause a lot of the hardship to a large number of people? I
think that the best way forward is to get people into higher wage, higher skilled jobs. And that's the ambition of this government. And we think, and if you ask me to make a choice between more welfare or better, higher paid jobs, I'm going to go for better, higher paid jobs.
Well, that's always been the view of Ian Douglas-Smith, of course, but he's calling for the £20 a week to be retained. Will you review this policy between now and September?
Of course, we keep everything under constant review, but I've given you a pretty clear steer about what my instincts are. And we're also, by the way, developing and pushing forward a lot of really excellent schemes for getting people into work. So not just Kickstart, but Restart and JETS, the job entry training scheme, to help people into work. I think that should be our mission. That should be our crusade. Can
I raise a different point with you? In February, you made the point to me in the chamber, rightly, I think, that the government is worried about the increase in online fraud. The Work and Pensions Committee, the Treasury Committee, the Governor of the Bank of England, Financial Conduct Authority, City of London Police have all called for the online safety bill, being published now, to tackle scams. Why is the government unwilling to make that change to that bill?
I'm not aware that we're failing to do that. But I'm very concerned that we should tackle fraud, and indeed I'm told that the online safety bill does just that. And companies
it does it for a very small part of the problem, which is user-generated content. It doesn't do it for online advertising, and that seems to be on a much longer-term track. And it's causing huge problems. So I wonder whether you could just have a look at the current online safety bill and see whether it could be changed to tackle online fraud.
I'm told that the bill will tackle a wide range of content and takes a focused approach to tackling online fraud. If you feel that it's in some way inadequate, I'm more than happy to look at it. But I know that one of the key objectives of the online safety bill is to tackle online fraud.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timms. Robert Halfon, Education.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. We've got Argentinian levels of hyperinflation in our schools, with 640,000 pupils being sent home this week compared to 385,000 the week or so before. The Centre for Social Justice have identified 93,500 ghost children who, for the most part, have not even returned to school since they were fully opened on March the 8th. We've also got exam orphans with Year 10 pupils due to sit GCSEs next summer, missing 1 in 4 days of face-to-face teaching. Of course, the £3 billion catch-up programme is hugely welcome, but what is your long-term plan to address endemic pupil absence, those pupils who've not even been back to school, and establish a level playing field so that all students have a fair crack of the whip doing exams next year?
Thanks, Robert. And I know how much you care about this and how vociferously, vehemently you campaign on this issue, and you're right. And what's happened over the last 18 months has been for many children really debilitating. And there's no question that they've lost unconscionable amounts of teaching and learning time, and we must remediate that. We must make it better. It's probably the single most important investment that we can make. So in addition to the 14 billion that we're putting into education that we began with as this government, we have a catch-up plan for a £3 billion catch-up plan. So far, and before we come to anything that the Chancellor may do later on this year. And what that focuses on, you ask how we're going to do it. I think the thing that works, and the thing that I've found that parents and teachers and pupils respond to, is more direct one-to-one, one-to-two tuition, and actually focusing on the needs of the individual child, and drawing out where they're going wrong, and really trying to focus on that. So we've got a massive program of that.
I completely am with you on that. I support the catch-up plan. 3 billion is a significant sum of money, but we know that the catch-up programme thus far is just reaching 44% of pupils on free school meals. Surely it should be focused on the most disadvantaged, and it doesn't address the endemic absence, the 93,500 children who are barely not in school virtually for most of the time, as I said, the Centre for Social Justice have identified. So why not redirect the way the catch-up programme is running, and also expand the Troubled Families programme to try and get these children back into school?
Rob, I think the best look. I know how unbelievably frustrating it is for parents and for pupils at the moment because of the numbers that are out of school because of the isolation policy that Greg and I were talking about just now, and the bubbles being sent home. And I understand why schools have been taking the actions that they have. They want to stop the spread of COVID, and they're quite right. And I fully support them. But the best thing is to move, as I think the Secretary of State for Education said yesterday, from bubbling to testing as the answer. And as I was saying to Greg, that is one thing that will help us to keep more kids in school. There are plenty of other children who are losing school time for other reasons, as I think you're hinting. We need to deal with that in a very, very determined way, and we need to. There will be more that I want to do on time in school and making sure that we invest in the school timetable as well.
So just finally, Chair, so just to be clear that you will have a focus on the close to 100,000 kids, I call them the ghost children, and haven't even been back in school since even when they fully reopened in March. But do you not think there should be a long-term plan for education, which a significant part of it would require a longer school day, not just for academic catch-up, but for extracurricular activities such as sport and well-being? And what more needs to be done to convince you as Prime Minister and the Treasury that a fully funded long-term plan with a longer school day is worth supporting and giving proper resources to?
We're looking at the evidence, and if I'm absolutely frank with you and the committee, to begin with, some of the evidence that was assembled was not as good as it could have been. The evidence on timetable, the evidence on lengthening the school day wasn't as powerful as it was on tuition, for instance. But that doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. I do think it's the right thing to do. The question is how you do it. What sort of activities? Is it enrichment? Is it academic? What's the mixture? As you rightly say, we're doing a proper review of all of that to get the evidence that we want. But in the meantime, over the summer, there's, as you know, all the summer schools, the holiday activities fund, a big effort to try to help kids to catch up before September as well.
Just will you look at the Troubled Families programme to try and grab these students back into school, that close to 100,000 who've not been in school at all? Or other means to try and get these kids back into school, because they're not going to be helped by the catch-up fund as it is.
No, I understand.
As it's currently running.
No, look, you're making a very good point, and you know, it's you get into a risk of a circular problem. You keep missing the same group. So I will certainly look at what we can do.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Prime Minister, could we just spare a thought for the teachers, because the health service gets all the limelight in this pandemic, but the teachers have taken a hell of a burden in
they
this.
Have. And the teachers have, Sir Bernard, you're completely right.
And the support staff. Don't forget the support staff.
And they've done an incredible job. And what's so interesting, you go to some schools, you can see the challenge that they have, because some kids, some children really are incredibly resilient and have just bounced through it without any problems at all. But that's not the case by any means for every child in this country, and it's had a big impact on.
Could you ask your Education Secretary to make sure that they get a break this summer from initiatives from his department, which have very often been contradictory and had to respond fast-moving pandemic, of course, but they long for a period of stability and predictability. I mean, can you have a word with him and see if he can provide them with a little respite?
I will do everything I can to
Thank you.
I totally understand that point, and all I would plead in mitigation and forgiveness from our wonderful teachers is it has been difficult to work out how to keep some things going, how to do examinations, but your point is well made.
Thank you. Catherine McKinnell.
Thank you. And could I also add the challenge that many teachers face currently, which is that they are off school with COVID, and that is causing huge difficulty for schools and obviously compounding the issues of catch-up. And I absolutely echo what the Select Committee Chair has said and wanted to ask you about that as well on behalf of petitioners, because the Education Policy Institute calculated that education catch-up spending per head in England is around 19% of what the US is spending and 12% of what the Netherlands is spending. How do you explain that?
Well, I don't recognise those figures, and I don't agree with them, because they failed to take. They failed to take account of the 14 billion that we invested in education as soon as I became Prime Minister, 14.4 billion, which took funding for every primary school pupil up to £4,000 a head, funding for every secondary school pupil up to £5,000 a head. So we began with massive investments, and we've added another 3 billion, and there will be more to come.
So, yes, the overall spending on catch-up for English pupils is £310 per head, and in the US it's £1,600 per head, and in the Netherlands it's £2,500 per head. We know the impact of this pandemic has been enormous on children and young people. Why is it that the Prime Minister feels we don't need to invest in helping them catch up and make the best of going forward in the future?
Well, that's obviously not how I see it. We're making a thick end of £20 billion investment already, and there will be more to come.
So, moving on to the impact of current COVID numbers, and also the potential impact when the restrictions are released on the 19th of July. I know you've said on many occasions you don't actually have the data, which is quite concerning, because the impacts on current COVID levels, particularly in regions like the North East, where we're seeing a surge, we're already seeing businesses unable to function, hospitality businesses having to close. If I take nurseries, for example, they have to maintain legal ratios of staff to children in order to stay open, and the early years sector has a very young workforce, many of whom are not double vaccinated. So cases are skyrocketing, and nurseries are being put in a position of having to turn families away in order to maintain legal ratios. Which families do you think they should be prioritising? Well,
I thank them for all that they're doing and for the difficulties that they're going through. As I was saying to Greg earlier on, we have to make sure that we use the tools we have to, in the form of isolation, to get through this particular phase. It won't last long. You talk about businesses, or the hospitality sector businesses closing. Actually, thanks to the vaccine rollout, we were able to get through to step 3, and now it looks as though, we'll take the final decision on July the 12th, but it looks as though we'll get through to step 4, which will allow them to open up fully without the need for the 1 metre rule, and that will, that's the most positive thing that can happen.
But that's all in theory, Prime Minister, because the reality is that businesses are facing huge staffing issues, with many having to isolate and therefore not able to function as businesses. It's in the hospitality industry, it's in many other industries, but particularly in those industries where a lot of young people are employed. So does the Prime Minister have the data for the relaxations he's proposing, and how those businesses are going to be affected over the next 2 to 3 months, given we're already seeing the impact of high COVID levels in areas like the North East?
Yes, if I may respectfully say, I don't think it's possible to argue simultaneously that businesses need to be able to be more open and at the same time to oppose the relaxations. It's not quite clear to me.
I'm asking the Prime Minister
I had a bit of this earlier on.
That's not the argument I'm making.
You can't have it both ways. You're either in favour of opening up and the rest of things.
I'm asking for the data. I'm asking whether you've seen the data.
I've already been very clear that we have data about hospitalisations and deaths. We have data about predictions for where they might go, but then they're available under the SPI-MO charts. You can look at them, but they're speculative at the moment. We're tracking in about the middle of the projections that SPI-M made for the third wave if we went ahead with all the openings. So we're the middle to low end of the projections that they made if you look at the graphs.
Okay, so the current crisis has put many new parents, particularly mothers, at risk of redundancy. So 2 years ago, the government announced it would extend redundancy protection for new mothers returning to work to 6 months. That was 2 years ago. When is this going to happen?
We want to help new mothers to return to work, but we want to help everybody to get back into work.
When is the redundancy protection going to happen that's been promised?
I can't give you the answer to that particular payment, but what I can certainly tell you is that at the moment the problem is, as I said earlier on, the problem is not so much a shortage of jobs or a lack of vacancies. The problem is a shortage of labour, and that is what we need to fix.
That doesn't stop women returning from maternity leave being made redundant.
No, and I don't want to see that happen.
1 in 9, are currently awaiting government legislation.
Can you let us know when you're going to bring that in?
Well, we'll do everything. Of course, I will let you know about that. But our intention is to help everybody coming back from maternity leave to get into work or back into work as fast as possible.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you. Caroline Noakes.
Thank you, Bernard. Prime Minister, can you tell me what specific initiatives ministers are bringing forward to build back in a more feminine and gender-neutral way?
Caroline, we are doing everything that we can to ensure that we have a recovery that is, as I was saying just now to Ms McKinnell, that gets our women back into the workforce. I know that they've had particular problems, making sure that we get everybody back to work in a way that is, as I say, fair across both sexes. Actually, if you look at what's happened with furlough, I think according to the Resolution Foundation, 52% of furlough has generally attracted more female recipients than male so far, which I think is positive. And
it's evidence, Prime Minister, that women were more likely to be in sectors that were shut down longer. What level of female employment do you regard as evidence that we have built back in a more feminine way?
Well, Karen, we want to make sure that we have female employment rising across the board. We want to have employment rising across the board. And just to quote what the Resolution Foundation said, they said that the economic impact of COVID-19 has been surprisingly equal for men and women. That doesn't mean that there aren't specific problems like the one that's just been referred to on returning from maternity leave that we must address, and we will.
But your own ministers won't publish economic impact assessments on furlough, so we don't know from the government's own figures what the impact has been across different genders.
Well, I'm quoting from the Resolution Foundation report.
But how about quoting from the economic impact assessments of your own ministers and the Government Equalities Office?
Well, as you know, Caroline, all policies must, under the Public Sector Equality Duty in the Equality Act, be scrutinised for their impact on different groups. But the information I have is that the gender pay gap is at a record low. We have 1.9 million more women in work than there were in 2010, and women, for instance, on FTSE 350 boards is up around 50%. 50%. There's a 50% increase in women on FTSE 350 boards in just 5 years, which I think is quite fast going. And those, I think, are pretty useful metrics, Caroline.
And should policies for recovery be in the round, or should they be targeted at those who were most impacted by COVID?
We want to have a recovery that looks after everybody in society. Everyone, everywhere, and if I think back to 28 and that crisis, I think that when we came out of it, I'm not certain that we did deal with people's sense of injustice and inequality. We have a huge job to do now as a government, as a Conservative government, to level up and unite across the whole country, and that is what we're going to do.
You can't point at a single policy or initiative that is going to help you build back in a more feminine and gender neutral way. Just one.
Well, I've mentioned the results. I've mentioned already what we've done by reducing the gender pay gap, Caroline, to an all-time low. If you look at, let's give you an example. Look at the Foreign Office. For instance, we now have female, which is leading. If you want to look at a more feminine approach to tackling climate change, it is our diplomats around the world in Washington, in New York, in Beijing. They're female. Caroline, and so many, and they are the people. They are the people at the tip of. They are the people at the tip of the UK mission to build back better for the world. 40. I think if you look at our climate change negotiators, Caroline, half of them are female, and they're doing a fantastic job, as I was saying earlier on, and they have succeeded in building back better for Britain and the world by getting 70% of the world's economy to commit to getting to net zero by 2050. That's a fantastic achievement by British women.
Thank you. But you didn't get the financial pledges from the G7 for the.
I think I'm getting the feeling that you would find fault with almost anything that we did, Caroline, with the greatest possible respect to you, and we did get the 100 billion, and I think that we will surprise you on the upside. And British women in COP and represented in this government, as they are abundantly, will surprise you on the upside by what they achieved to build back better in a more feminine way. And if you can think of a way of saying build back more feminine in a pithier way, then send me a postcard.
Well, our sole role is to find fault so that you can make things even better, Prime Minister. Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Sir Bernard. Prime Minister, you talk about building back better and levelling up. What's your message to people who are living in seriously overcrowded accommodation, who, since the time you've been Mayor and Prime Minister, have seen toddlers grow into teenagers in that accommodation, who are working but can't afford the private rents and can't afford to buy? Your government has fuelled house purchases, but what support are you going to give to those people who need better housing?
Well, don't forget that this government, well, first of all, you mentioned that my time as Mayor, and I'm glad you do, because it gives me
80% private rents was your definition of affordable.
Gives me the opportunity to point out the paucity of the current Labour mayors.
No, Prime Minister, I'm actually asking about what you're doing as Prime Minister. Can I just mention? I mentioned it doesn't mean that. But Prime Minister, if you want to talk about your record as Mayor, Prime Minister, that was when you defined affordable housing. Can I just speak? If you could let me finish. Yeah, you defined affordable housing as 80% of local private rents. Do you know what private rents are in Central and in London?
This is the government that actually just increased local housing allowance again. Don't forget, in order to tackle precisely that.
That doesn't tackle the overcrowding, Prime Minister.
And
the supply.
when you talk about supply, and if I can talk about the record of the previous Mayor of London and the current Mayor of London, that's banned apparently, but it's a relevant consideration. I built far more.
You're
homes.
the big boss now,
I
Prime
built
Minister.
far more homes than he did. But now across the UK, we had this last year a record number of housing starts, and never let it be forgotten that the Conservatives, I think, in
Prime
one
Minister,
year,
my point
in
isn't,
one year
Prime
built
Minister,
more council
your
homes
own government
built more council homes
Prime Minister,
than Labour did in 13
Prime Minister,
years.
your government cannot even tell us how many social housing units have been built. You're fuelling a supply but for purchase, which is fine for those who can purchase, but for many people, particularly in expensive parts of the country, like my constituency, cannot purchase and cannot rent.
Don't forget, Meg, that we built more council homes in 1 year than your Labour Party, your Labour government did in 13 years. Okay, so I won't take any lessons about building social homes. And I built
but
more.
Enough, is it,
and I built
Minister?
more in
Not
London than the current mayor has done or will do. And we will, and by the way, I disagree with you respectfully about. People's ambitions for home ownership. I do think social housing is of massive importance. We must build more social housing. That's totally right. But I think ultimately lots of people in this country, in their 20s, 30s, 40s,
Prime Minister, you're playing games with my words. I have nothing against home ownership, but many people simply can't afford it. Many people simply can't afford it.
Made your point, Meg. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I prefer respectfully as part of the discourse. Can we move on to post-Brexit impact, and we go to the Chair of the Scottish Select Committee, Pete Wishart.
Thank you, Sir Bernard, and good afternoon, Prime Minister. Since Brexit's happened, there seems to be a whole lot of activity around what's referred to as strengthening the Union. What if it becomes clear that Scotland doesn't want the Union strengthened?
I'm not at all sure that that's true, Pete, and you and I have had many exchanges on this in the past, but I think that there was a vote in 2014. I think it was pretty clear what the people of Scotland wanted. It was decisive, and in terms of the union, Pete, just look at it. In a dispassionate way. The strength of our common institutions was really palpable during that pandemic.
Well, what I am looking at is
an
election that was held less than 2 months ago, and as you know, Prime Minister, what was elected was a majority of MSPs who favoured independence for a nation. So, that would indicate to me that there doesn't seem to be such an appetite for a strengthening of the union. In fact, quite the opposite. So, would you just do this Scotland anyway, regardless of what our democratic institutions say about this?
Would I do what?
Strengthen the union, do whatever that is supposed to be. Would you do it just like you imposed the Internal Market Act upon Scotland, just like you decided that Scotland would be taken out of the European Union, even though it was rejected by the overwhelming majority of people in Scotland? Is it just something you'd do to us? Is this how you're going to approach Scotland and the Scottish Government now? Just do things to us?
No, I don't think it can be bad for all the constituent parts of the union to have their trading relations strengthened, to have their friendship strengthened, to have their means of easy communication strengthened, their routes from one part of the union to another strengthened. It seems to me to be a good thing and something that's pretty hard to argue against.
Well, it's just that your former senior advisor, rather uncharitably, said you were an unthinking unionist who thinks devolution was a disaster, who would like to reverse it but won't dare try. That's pretty accurate, isn't it? Would you reverse devolution if you had the chance?
No.
What do you really feel about devolution?
Pete, I was a massive beneficiary of devolution. As I was just saying to Meg Hillier, it was the Labour government's decision to in the late 90s to follow the John Smith package and to devolve that enabled me to become Mayor of London, and and I think it was a great thing. Now, what you didn't find when I was Mayor of London, you didn't find me endlessly attacking central government and moaning about it, and you didn't find me endlessly trying to shuffle off blame and responsibility on the central government. I took responsibility for things. I took responsibility. If I may say, I think the problem is not with devolution. The problem is with the party in power.
Just on that, this disaster seems to crop up quite a bit because the one you have admitted to it and you conceded to is that when you were speaking to Northern Tory MPs, you said that devolution was Tony Blair's biggest mistake, and again you referred to it as a disaster. You did say that, didn't you?
I certainly think that there are disastrous aspects of Scottish government, Scottish national.
But you weren't referring
Scottish National Party's
performance. You were referring to devolution.
Scottish National Party's performance in delivering education, in fighting crime, in tackling the scourge of drugs. I think there have been lamentable failures. Yes, I do. Now, the difficult thing for me as Prime Minister of the UK is it's a difficult thing, because I love the whole UK and I want it all to succeed. It's very hard to mount the ramparts and say that something is going wrong in Scotland. I don't want to do that. I want Scotland to be brilliantly governed, and it should be. But I just think that the SNP is not delivering as what it could.
We won't start to go to your government, but you're now the Minister for the Union. Could you maybe list your top 3 achievements since you gave yourself that position?
Well, I think that I think it would be invidious of me to comment. I think I will leave that
it must be
to others.
You're Minister of the Union, for goodness sake.
I think that the Union is. Let me give you an example of the strength of the Union. It became obvious to me during the pandemic. The role of the British Army, for instance, in rolling out not just the vaccine,
one of achievements as a British Army,
not just the vaccine, but the testing centres. I do think that the vaccine rollout can be broadly counted an achievement of the government. Yes, I do. And I think I would even go so far as to say the Union played a massive role in the development of the vaccine. Let me just and the whole testing.
I've only got mental health.
You've asked me, so I'm going to.
You're not giving me any examples.
I have. I've given you one, which is the vaccine rollout. Number 2, testing. It was fantastic to go to Glasgow and see the work of scientist students in Glasgow testing samples that came from Kent, and it was thanks to the work of those Glasgow scientists that we were able to identify the Kent. I'm
asking specifically about Scotland.
It's been wonderful.
Are you going to
see the Union?
Are you going to come back to Scotland for another staycation this summer?
Wild horses won't keep me away.
Because they always go so well, don't they? Like particularly for us in the independence movement anyway.
Well, I noticed that the Conservatives, since Conservatives got a bigger share of the vote than ever before. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jenkins. And it's come to the West Country, Prime Minister, for your holiday this year. Come to Devon, the sun shines always in Devon. Now, with Brexit becomes trade deals, and we've now got an in-principle trade deal with Australia, which we welcome strategically. Now, what it brings with it is, in the future, 100,000 tonnes of beef. So, we've got great ruby red beef being reared on Exmoor. We've got great lambs across the country and great milk. What we need now to do is to go on a great drive to export to Australia, export all across the world. So what Prime Minister are you going to put in place to help us get a great British brand, and I do say British, and get it across the world?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Parrish. We are doing a massive export drive for British food, and we have staff in 119 markets who are dedicated to supporting UK food and drink, and we are opening up. So in June we got, I think thanks to the deals done by Liz, by Secretary of State for Trade, we're now selling poultry to Japan. for the first time. We in March of last year, we finally broke down the barriers to British beef going to America. And I know that you take a lively interest in British beef, Neil, and you'll be thrilled to know that one company called Foyles Food has already sold 3 million tonnes. Foyles have already sold 3 million pounds worth. 3 million tonnes would be a lot.
A lot of beef.
Pounds worth. 3 million pounds worth of beef to the United States, and where Foyles it's just it's the thin end of the wedge. It's the beginning. And I'm sure that you and the British farming will find plenty of other opportunities around the world.
Yes, we greatly welcome what we're doing, but you see, we've got a councillor in Beijing, and that's about all we have, you see, from our embassies. And so, therefore, you've got the Australians within 15 locations across the world, and they spend $20 million. So, in our embassies, we need to have food councillors to be able to promote our British food, because if we're going to really get on the front foot, because trade is not only just about one way coming into this country, it's going out. And if we want to build a greater environment for our food, that grass-fed beef has got to be reared, it's got to be looked after, and then it's got to be sold at a profit. We've got to get that into those foreign markets. So what are we going to do to have our embassies, to have these councillors across the world? Can you give me a commitment to do that?
I can say, first of all, how much I love your attitude, and you're right, to be optimistic about it. And Scottish beef too, by the way, Pete. It's the future. So what we want to do is, actually, you'll find if as you go around our embassies, there is always somebody there who knows what to do. But I think what we need to do is make sure that the agricultural sector themselves know where the opportunities are, and what we should be doing, I think, is in a much more crisp way, summarising the opportunities, giving them to the food and drink
but Prime
business.
Minister, sorry to interrupt, but that's what these food councillors particularly do in all these countries, right? They go back to their country and say, this is the way to get into the market, this is to help the small businesses, the farms, everybody else, the processors, get out there into China, Far East, wherever it might be. That's why we need these food councillors. So that's what we need.
Yes, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. There should be somebody in every embassy around the world who has that responsibility. But I also want to do, we're putting £38 million into giving SMEs the information that they need on their side. So we need to join them up. We need to join up the British food business, in all its amazing diversity. We need to join up the manufacturers, the entrepreneurs, all the people who are making this stuff, with our diplomatic network,
Minister,
so they know what to apply.
Prime Minister, we're in total agreement, but the one thing I haven't got from you is, are you going to put those resources in place?
Well, I've already told you. So we've got 38 million goes into DITS,
yes, but it's to make sure
fund,
that within our embassies we have those food councillors. I'm sorry to press it, because we've been trying to do this for years, and we must make sure we do it.
We have in 119 markets. That's by markets I mean countries. We have a specific staff dedicated to agricultural, food and drink.
And you will put those resources
in. What I undertake to you, Neil, is I will go back and I will make sure that we have somebody specifically devoted to increasing food and drink exports, and somebody who, and what we also need to do is build up the networks so that people, so that the business in this country, which mainly sell within this country, start to think about export as well. That's why we're putting the 25 million into export finance for food and drink, but also the 38 million to build up the network.
Well, thank you, Prime Minister. I'll take you up on your offer.
Good. Oh, I hope to see your.
Can we add that topic to the letter?
You certainly can. You certainly can.
This and can I also ask you, Prime Minister, if you will include a note on the figures of expected hospital admissions if isolation was ended on the 19th of July rather than on the 16th of August?
I will see what I can do.
That would be very helpful. Thank you. Can I just also add one of the post-Brexit hangovers, where we used to export musicians and talent across the European Union with great alacrity, and this is very severely threatened, as you know, and was raised by Julian Knight at the last session, and he's asked me to raise it again. And it seems the EU is still digging in on the question of an EU visa waiver for touring artists, musicians and performers. In your talks with Chancellor Merkel, and I did raise this with you by letter before you saw her, did you get an opportunity to raise this with her?
Well, in fact, Germany is one of the better countries on this issue. And I mean, we didn't specifically discuss this at our recent meeting, but the Germans are better than some others. About 17 EU members are quite good. 7 are not so good, and we are working on it to sort it out, and we will. Now, the proposal that for a total visa waiver is obviously an interesting one. You'd have to ask yourself, well, what other professions could you include in that? And it's hard to see where you would draw the line. And you know, Sir Bernard, you campaigned heroically for taking back control of our borders and for coming out of the EU. We wouldn't want accidentally to reverse that in this particular case by gradual erosion of our freedom. So we are making a great deal of progress, and I appreciate how frustrating it is. And I know that Sir Elton John is in talks with other EU partners about how to speed this up. But I feel it's very much in their interests. This is something that all our societies benefit from massively, and I hope that it will be speedily resolved.
Well, I think I would have enjoyed asking Chancellor Merkel who wants to stop cultural exchange, which was one of the objectives of her visit.
No,
the
as far as I
answer
can
is the
remember,
European Commission, because we would not stop visiting artists coming to our own country, but we are losing people from London permanently. They're going to take up residence in other European countries with European citizenship because they can't pursue their careers by staying in London.
I hope that we're not, and the evidence doesn't seem to support the view that we're losing all EU nationals because, after all, as you will have noticed...
It's not about EU nationals, it's about British citizens taking up citizenship in other countries. Because their career opportunities are so limited compared to what they were. It's a very serious problem, Prime Minister. I hope you'll encourage Lord Frost.
I will, and I know that you're a distinguished and famous chorister, Sir Bernard, and I hope that your own your gigs have not been in any way restricted as a result of this so far. And I will make sure that we do whatever we can.
I've been resting for some time. I'm now going to move on to Simon Hall, Chairman of Northern Ireland Committee.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, I think you and I will agree that there is nothing in the Northern Ireland Protocol which in any way affects negatively the constitutional integrity of our United Kingdom. Now, while you and I might see that and understand it, there's a growing group of people who live in Northern Ireland, you will be aware of this, who are very concerned that the protocol is in some way a stepping stone to a border poll and a reunification referendum and the like. In a number of evidence sessions that we've had recently in the committee, it's become very clear that they want to hear in the clearest possible terms from you as Prime Minister, your support for Northern Ireland as part of the UK, its continuation as part of the UK whilst it wishes to be so, and the determination to maintain the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Could I invite you to do that this afternoon?
You certainly can, Simon. I've just been called an unthinking unionist by my friend Pete, and I don't think I'm an unthinking unionist. I think I'm a passionate unionist. I believe in our country and the way it works in the four nations coming together. I think it's a fantastically powerful thing. It's the greatest global advertisement for cooperation and working together. It is a wonderful thing, and we want to strengthen it, not in an assertive or interfering way, but we want to strengthen it. And there is, Simon, absolutely no threat to Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom, and there should not be. Let me measure my words. There should not be from the protocol. And it's clear in Article 6.2 of the protocol, for instance, that all sides are asked to use their best endeavours to ensure that there is free trade, a seamless movement between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It's clear that Northern Ireland is part of the sovereign territory of the United Kingdom. That's all clear from the protocol. The unfortunate thing is that the protocol is being applied currently in a way that causes some of the anxieties to which you've just referred. And so what we have to do...
I wanted to come on to that.
Yes.
So I did want to come on to that point. Thank you for the clarity of the first part of the answer. That's appreciated. I know it will be heard across Northern Ireland this afternoon. The Joint Committee was clearly set up because it was known that the protocol at the start wasn't going to be perfect, that there were going to be issues that would need to be addressed. And that is best done through a position of mutual political trust. Business, we keep hearing in the committee, will abide by whatever rules it is that we as politicians require them to abide by, as long as there is certainty and clarity and stability in the delivery of those. What value, if you will, would you put on that issue of political trust in the workings of the Joint Committee, with a bit of give and take, which I know is not always palatable to some, but with a bit of give and take on both sides, to make sure that the protocol is working as well as it possibly can, so that those benefits of one foot in both markets, which is a unique selling point for Northern Ireland, can be maximised?
I think you're spot on, Simon. I think that is what is needed. I think what is needed now is goodwill and imagination, but there are some very serious problems. And you know the statistics of all the checks that are currently conducted around the whole perimeter of the EU for customs and other purposes. 20% are taking place in Northern Ireland, although I think the island of Ireland has only 0.5% of the EU's population or thereabouts. You've got a very difficult situation in which vital drugs have not been able to be moved from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, 30 drugs, including cancer drugs. I think about 200 companies have stopped shipping stuff. There's been impediments to the movement of guide dogs, of parcels, of potted plants, of tractor parts. I think I'm right in saying that ASDA is not actually, they don't actually have ASDA shops in the Republic of Ireland, and yet ASDA goods coming into Northern Ireland have all to be checked. And only yesterday there were very serious representations from the Jewish community in Northern Ireland who pointed out that because of the problem with the food sector, it was becoming difficult for them to have timely access or any access to kosher food. And they're talking now about an exodus from Northern Ireland by the Jewish community. Now, clearly, we want to do everything we can to avoid that and to sort it out. But it's going to take our friends in the Joint Committee to make some movement and to make that movement pretty fast.
And what movement would you envisage the UK government making? As it, to coin the phrase, it takes two to tango.
I think we've been very clear that We are implementing the protocol. The UK is a faithful, obedient servant of the law. The things that I have described are a direct result of what UK officials are doing in upholding the law and obeying the EU jurisdiction. The problem is that I think, and I think any impartial listener of this conversation, I think that the way the EU is trying to implement the protocol is currently grossly disproportionate and unnecessary.
Prime Minister, could I just ask you one final question, which is, could you say a little about what you think the status is of our relationship with regards to the Republic of Ireland at the current time, and where you would like to see it move to? How you would like to see it?
I think that's a really terrific question, and I think the sooner we can put this problem behind us, the better, because the relations between London and Dublin underlying this issue are truly fantastic, and the relations we have both with Micheál Martin and indeed as we had with his predecessor Leo Varadkar are very, very progressive. There are things we want to do. We want to get on and do them. There are things where the UK and Ireland can work together on talking about connectivity, but as I was with Pete, on north-south connectivity in the island of Ireland, on what we can do east-west. Or what we can do over the border, working together in the Londonderry area. There is a huge amount that we want to get on and do together to strengthen our friendship and partnership. Don't forget, the UK's economic relations with Ireland are colossal. I mean, they remain one of our biggest export markets, our biggest trading partners and friends.
Testing your patience by going over time, and
no,
we're being very generous. But this is the final set of questions on the same topic from Sir Bill Cash.
I'm sure our viewers may be switching over to the football. I mean, I don't know that we're able to compete with for much longer.
No. So, Prime Minister, do you agree that one of the primary reasons for our signing the Northern Ireland Protocol was to preserve the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and that the mutual obligations in the protocol must be seen through that focus, which we do, but unfortunately the EU seems to ignore? Although I have to admit they have made one sensible decision on the question of chilled meats. But on the other hand, we need many more sensible decisions of that kind. And do you agree that we need them soon and in the immediate future?
Yes, we do, Sir Bill. And on chilled meats, by the way, just going back to what I was saying to Simon, that is very far from fixed. All we have is a stay of execution there. And this is what the Jewish community was saying in Northern Ireland. They're facing a real problem unless we can sort this out. And I agree totally with your characterisation of the problem. We understand the vital importance of protecting free movement north-south and protecting making sure that there should be no hard border within the island of Ireland. That's the whole point, and we've done that, and it's been a massive effort by the UK state. What we agreed was that to make that happen in a reasonable way, we would undertake to do certain checks on stuff that could circulate, in theory, in Ireland itself after arrival in Northern Ireland. That's what we undertook to do as an act of neighbourliness, to look after the EU single market, which is what they wanted us to do. We also agreed, unfortunately, that the EU could have a say in how this was done. And that has been the problem. And they've been implementing the protocol in a way that is producing the types of anomalies that I've been describing. And we need to fix it.
So given the unique circumstances, as the protocol states, of the Northern Ireland situation, which is both deeply historical and deeply political, with the marching season coming on and all the rest of it, do you agree that we must also focus on stability, trade, peace and community relationships in Northern Ireland, without in any way apologising, and to pick up on what Simon was saying earlier, on our insisting on the constitutional integrity of Northern Ireland as an inviolable part of the United Kingdom.
Absolutely, and that's after all what it says in the protocol.
That's
So,
right, yeah.
I think that is a very fair point. I think what we all need to do is work rapidly on some solutions, fix this thing fast. I think it will take some effort, but we really can't exclude anything. We've got any actions that the UK government may need to take, as I've said many times, to protect what it says in the protocol, the East-West dimension of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which is equally important as the North-South dimension, clearly, and to protect the territorial integrity of the UK.
And how often do we have to say to them, it's in your and our mutual interests to be flexible about this arrangement, because actually it may be written down in a certain fashion, but actually the truth is, if you want to get this right, you have to have a degree of mutual cooperation and flexibility.
Yeah, I think that's right, and we will. The noble Lord Frost will continue to make that point with his customary diplomatic force and skill.
Quite right.
And ultimately, couldn't we recognise that Article 13.8 of the protocol actually does presage the possibility of superior arrangements to the protocol, alternative arrangements?
It does.
And that if that is going to be protecting the Good Friday Agreement more effectively and treating the two communities with more parity and fairness, that would be the right way forward.
Completely right, Sir Bernard, and it cannot be beyond the wit of man, as I think you and I and others have been saying for at least 5 years, for technology to come to our aid and sort it out.
Well, Prime Minister, thank you very much. You've been very patient, staying an extra 20 minutes. I'm very grateful to you. Won't detain you a moment longer. Order.
Thank you.
Portcullis House, the Wilson.
Liaison Committee. Liaison Committee.